Nandipha Magudumana's father, 65-year-old Zolile Sekeleni, and former G4S security company employee Sinoe Matswara have been charged with murder, fraud and defeating the ends of justice. They appeared earlier in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court. The two stand accused of playing a role in helping fugitive Thabo Bester escape from the Mangaung Correctional Center. Let's find out more now of what came out of today's proceedings. Our senior reporter, Silindelo Masikane, is monitoring the case. Silindelo, good afternoon. Well, what happened briefly there in court? Take us through the highlights.
Well, a very short session today in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court, Bradan. We all arrived as the media just before 9 a.m., expecting court proceedings to start just after 9. But as a first appearance, the docket hadn't arrived, obviously, and we were told that proceedings would start at around 11 a.m. At around 11:30, we were then ushered into the courtroom. Heavy security, I must say. We all had to wear wristbands in order to identify ourselves. Therefore, if you didn't have a wristband, then you wouldn't be let into the courtroom. We were also then told that the magistrate would not allow photographers. So photographers had to quickly take their photographs when the accused came up into the dock. The gallery as well, I must say, was quite full. I noticed a couple of family members from the Sekeleni family. However, they did not want to speak to the media, and also a number of relatives of accused number one, the former G4S employee. When they did actually make their way up into the dock, you did see Mr. Sekeleni trying to hide his face, but I think he saw that that exercise was quite futile, and the prosecutor then quickly introduced the docket as well as the charges that you've read out, Bradan, and we understand, of course, that the attorneys did agree with the state to postpone the matter. Let's just take a listen to what the NPA had to say with regards to those proceedings this morning.
They are currently facing four charges. The count of murder comes from the evidence that we got that there was a body that was burnt inside the holding cell, where in one of the holding cells at the correctional facility. That is where the issue of a count of murder is coming from. The evidence that we have at the moment points to the two accused being involved in the assistance of the escape of an inmate at a correctional facility in Mangaung prison. But we're not ruling out the possibility of more people being involved. So we can also not rule out the possibility of more people being arrested. But the evidence that is before the prosecution at the moment links to the two accused to all the charges, all 5 charges that were that they're currently facing. Yes, the two accused appeared before the Bloemfontein Magistrate Court today, and the request from prosecution was that the matter be postponed until next week, Monday, which is the 17th of April, because we don't have the bail information of the two accused. So possibly Monday will proceed with bail application depending on the bail information that we're going to get in respect of the two accused.
Can you clarify where they're going to be held?
One accused, which is accused number one, Sinoe Matswara, will be outside the town of Bloemfontein, because the reason for that was that he's a former employee of the correctional facility here in Bloemfontein. So the request was that to avoid him interfering with the investigation, let's make a request that he be placed at a correctional facility outside Bloemfontein. So it's only accused number 2 who will be placed at the correctional facility here in Bloemfontein.
Oh, very interesting there. Silindelo, you've been doing a brilliant job on this story, following it as closely as you can. What can we expect next, Silindelo? When is this matter back in court?
So you would have heard briefly from that clip from the NPA when I spoke to Paladi Shubing that we are expecting court proceedings to resume next week on the 17th of April. That's next week, Monday, for a formal bail application. It does seem as though that the lawyers for the accused do want to try and get them out of custody as soon as possible. At this point, also from speaking to the NPA, Bradan, investigations are still underway. The possibility of more charges being added hasn't been ruled out, and certainly the issue of more people being arrested also hasn't been ruled out. We've seen a number of statements coming from officials in law enforcement as well as DCS around officials that have been implicated, not only from G4S but also from the Department of Correctional Services. So I think over the next couple of days we're going to be seeing a number of developments with regards to the net closing in on those the state believes played a role in this escape saga. And of course we're also anticipating the return of Bester as well as Dr. Nandipha and the Mozambican accomplice who were apprehended in Tanzania. We know that the delegation left over the weekend. The South African delegation rather, to meet with their counterparts, and we understand that the process that is going to unfold is a deportation process. I know South Africans were anticipating that they would be back in the country possibly by today, but we know that this is going to be a process that's going to require a little bit of time, because those who were apprehended in Tanzania, Bester and Nandipha, may actually have to go through the Tanzanian court system first before they can be deported back. But from what we understand is that the country where they were apprehended is more than willing to cooperate and to assist in any way possible to ensure the return of the accused, for Bester rather to be reincarcerated, and then for Dr. Nandipha as well as the Mozambican to face their own charges in South Africa. We're also expecting tomorrow, Bradan, a parliamentary sitting for the Justice and Correctional Services Portfolio Committee, where we are expecting G4S to account for its role in this saga. They were summoned last week by the committee.
Okay. Thank you, Silindelo. The valid point before you go, Silindelo, is that in Tanzania, they broke the law from what we've heard because their passports had not been stamped. So I guess the Tanzanian legal system, as you said, will have to kick in. We're going to have to wait a little bit longer for the return. But crucially, you point out there's very good relations, historically so as well, between Tanzania and South Africa. Hopefully the two local authorities will find each other. But in court today, were there any members of the family on Mr. The father, the 65-year-old Zolile Sekeleni, the father of Dr. Nandipha Magudumana? Were there anybody present? Was G4S, for example, present, or their lawyers? And if so, what was the sentiment like, in the mood like inside court as we conclude?
I didn't notice anyone from G4S, Bradan, but I did notice some relatives, friends of accused number one, the former G4S employee. I understand his girlfriend was there, and she did her utmost not to be noticed, or I guess not for the media to be able to identify her in court. She was wearing big sunglasses. She had her hair covered and her face covered with a veil. She was wearing all black, but I also did have an opportunity to speak to Zolile's other daughter, who was actually here on behalf of the Sekeleni family. She was also doing her best not to be noticed by the media. She actually asked me to assist her in terms of trying to see if she could be able to speak to her father before court proceedings began, because there were some issues around his legal representation before court proceedings began. It did seem as though he would have been appearing without a lawyer, because their lawyer, who was going to initially represent Mr. Mr. Sekeleni dropped the family at the last minute, but it does seem as though the delay to court proceedings assisted them in being able to secure a new lawyer for their father. You can imagine they're quite nervous, they're anxious as the family. Their father is quite elderly, but she was just saying to me that they're just trying to see where they can assist their father in this particular process. So we await the proceedings resuming next week and see exactly where they're going to stand when it comes to that bail application and whether or not the state will oppose it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Silindelo. You're doing brilliant work on this story. Stay on it. Thank you very much, Silindelo Masikane, our senior reporter in Bloemfontein. Now,